been about 6 years since I was with you last, and it wasn't in this building. It was in your other facility, and I'm really glad to be back with you. I do like Lubbock. I like the town. I like the eateries, and I really love the brethren here. It's just a great joy to be here, and this time to bring my wife and to bring my best friend and my best friend's wife, and to be able to share with you this weekend together. I'm a little embarrassed that Mark mentioned Nathan, that they didn't sleep well because of people running up and down the corridors and shouting. I've already apologized to Mark and Judy for Paula, and we were just exuberant last night, and about 4 a.m. thought we'd celebrate, and I don't know, Mark just keeps bringing it up, but it's an appropriate segue because we're going to talk about apologizing, so I'm sorry, Mark and Judy, for our exuberant joy, our joy in the Lord. I apologize for that. We're going to talk about apologies. We're going to talk about how to give them and how to receive them this morning. And everybody needs to know how to apologize. You know why? Because we all do things that need apologizing for. In the workbooks that those of you who have been involved in the marriage retreat weekend have, there's a statement there by Ed Wheat, and it's the First Years of Forever book. Marriage becomes a series of surprises for most of us, and one of them is how frequently we need to forgive and to be forgiven. Of course, we know that because we're Christians, that we need to forgive and be forgiven. In fact, Jesus made that one of the conditions for being forgiven. Forgive us our trespasses or debts as we forgive those who trespass against us or our debtors. How we give apologies is really important. In Proverbs chapter 15, verse 2, Proverbs 15:2, the statement is made, the tongue of the wise makes knowledge acceptable. The tongue of the wise people know how to speak in such a way that it makes knowledge acceptable. You know, you can say some things and speak them in the truth, and it won't be received because it just wasn't said in the proper way. There's just a difference in speaking with wisdom that makes it acceptable, that makes people receive it. And that is very much true for what we're talking about this morning. So what we need to do is learn how to speak words of affection, words of acceptance, words of appreciation for others. When we do that, then we speak with wise tongues. Somebody said a fight only starts with the second blow. Somebody can say something, and if we have the ability to let it go, there's not a fight. But if it goes beyond that, now we've got conflict, and we need to find out how to resolve that. There's a book, and I think it's in our recommendations, if I remember, of books for married couples called Fight Fair, written by Tim and Joy Downs. And one of their concepts in that book is fascinating to me, is the idea that you really, in conflict, need to follow some of the kind of rules that we have in games. When we play games with each other, we learn how to get along by, we're all working toward a goal, but we're kind of working against each other, but we learn how to work together to achieve those goals. And one of their points is pass the dice. The idea is take turns speaking. I'm not really getting much into conflict itself. We've got whole lessons that we've done on that subject together at some of our retreats and some of our opportunities. We're not really getting into that today. But if we can learn to do that, it might make the apologies less frequent and maybe more acceptable if we learn how to pass the dice. When your turn's over, let the other person speak. Listen long, talk short. Isn't that what James said? Let each one of us be quick to hear, slow to speak, and then slow to anger. And I would suggest one more, just a practical tip. When you're interrupted in an argument, I'm not real good at this, but I know it works. I tried it once and it did. If you're interrupted, just stop talking and remain silent. You don't have to argue. I was just stop talking and remain silent. I think it's friendlier and perhaps more effective than arguing that you were interrupted. The apology. How to give an apology and how to accept it. You remember the movie, some of you who are older. Younger people won't unless you just like to watch old movies. But there was a slapstick comedy made back in the 70s called What's Up, Doc? Starred Ryan O'Neal and Barbara Streisand. And it came on the heels of one of the sappiest, lousiest love movies ever made called Love Story, which also starred Ryan O'Neal. And in that movie, a man and a woman, the woman's dying, and at the very end of her life, this young woman with this young man sitting by her bedside listens to him as he apologizes to her because he didn't quite treat her the way he should have. And he says, I just want you to know, I'm sorry. And she looks at him with these big doe eyes and makes this statement that many people remembered from that movie. Love means never having to say you're sorry. Oh, people thought that was so romantic. Guys liked it because it gave them an out. So in his very next movie, Ryan O'Neal's playing the part opposite Barbara Streisand. And at the end of the movie, he says to her on an airplane, I just want you to know I'm sorry. And Barbara Streisand bats her eyes and says, love means never having to say you're sorry. And people make the connection because it's the same star. And Ryan O'Neal looks at her with disgust and says, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. It may very well be. Love means learning how to apologize, how to say you're sorry. So here's what I want to do. I want to begin with 10 apologies you need to be sorry for. I want to offer just 10 ways of saying you're sorry that are terrible ways of saying you're sorry. And my guess is we're all going to wince because we're all going to find ourselves at some time with one of these. If you're using one of these all the time, we need to have a real long discussion. But we all use these and they are not effective, and I'll tell you why very simply. Then I want to tell you what a true and really appropriate, effective apology sounds like. Then we'll talk about how to receive an apology. Here are the 10. Number 1, I'm sorry. Now, can we just drop it? The problem with this is it's what we call a premature apology. It usually comes early in the conflict, and it's an attempt to just get away from this and not work through it. We need to understand that when we're in conflict, there is a problem, a challenge, and we need to work it out. It won't do to sweep it under the carpet or dismiss it or say, I don't want to talk about it. If it's conflict in your marriage particularly, I guarantee you, it's a sore that's going to rise up again. It's going to come back. So it's important to learn how to deal with it. Now, I do not mean, and we've already talked about this, we talked about it last night, it may very well be you want to postpone the discussion. But you can't short circuit it by saying, I'm sorry, can we just drop it? I'll tell you the worst time to get in a conflict, and Satan knows it. Worst time, in the car on the way to church. Because if you don't have time to resolve it in the car. And so you get out of the car and you're furious. You're still angry at each other. You need to resolve this. There's tension in the air. But as you close the car doors, you have to put on the church face. Have to walk in. People ask you, how are you? You have to say, fine. You can't say, terrible. We've just had a terrible fight in the parking lot. Can't do that. You have to sit next to each other through church. If you sit, you're sitting up here and your wife's in the back, people say, what's going on? There's something wrong. So you have to play a game. You have to sit next to each other. And terrible if the preacher says, today, let's just all hold hands. But you can't resolve that conflict by closing the car doors in the parking lot and saying, I'm sorry, now can we just drop it? That doesn't resolve it. Doesn't resolve it. So you may have to put that resolution conversation on hold till you get back in the car and head back home. But you can't just apologize and walk away from it. Doesn't work. Number 2, I'm sorry. Is that what you want? This is called the apology of expedience. The apology of expedience. Okay, somebody needs to apologize. Okay, I'm sorry. You got it? That's good. Look, it's not the words. We need to understand, it's not just the words, I'm sorry, that make this go away. Those aren't magic words like a Harry Potter incantation. Say, I'm sorry, and it all dissipates. That won't work that way. And we need to understand that. The third is called a reverse or partial apology. I'm sorry, but you make me angry when you say that. I'm sorry, but I've just had a really bad day and you just hit me at the wrong time. I'm sorry, but you know how that always gets to me. The problem with that is it's really a reverse apology. It's saying, I'm sorry for what I did, but you need to know you're really at fault. It's kind of like, it's similar to what Adam did in the garden. When God comes to Adam and he says, what is this you've done? And Adam fesses up by saying, the woman you gave me made me eat. I mean, he throws her under the chariot. They didn't have buses then. And you say, they didn't have chariots either, Ralph. I'm sorry, but really throws it on the other person. It says I'm agreeing that I did the wrong thing, but I have good reason for doing the wrong thing. Because that's a hot button for me, or it's a bad time for me, or you know how you can always get my goat when you do this. It's really not an apology at all. It's an indictment of the other person. And I would suggest something to you. Don't allow your mate to get away with a but apology. You may, in fact, learn that your mate does that, and as soon as they start saying the but word, just say, I accept your apology. Oh, that'll kill them. I'm sorry, but thank you for your apology. I accept that. Just short circuit that. It doesn't work. I'm sorry, but doesn't work. There's another apology, number 4, called an absence of malice apology. It goes something like this. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to hurt you by that. I'm sorry, I didn't intend to embarrass you by that. It says, I really am not at fault because I didn't have ill will toward you. Now, I understand sometimes we say we're sorry for something we did when it really was a mistake. I'm sorry I'm late, my watch wasn't near me, or it wasn't giving the proper time. Or I'm sorry I ran out of gas. Now that's certainly apologizing for something for which you have no malice or ill will. But when you've done something to your mate, this "I wasn't trying to hurt you" doesn't satisfy. It may still hurt. If I'm in the airport, and I've had this happen, I'm on the plane trying to get my bag down, and when I get it down from the overhead compartment, because people are all around me, I may elbow somebody next to me. I immediately turn around and say, "I'm sorry." I don't turn around and say, "I didn't intend to do that." I still apologize. I've caused some discomfort or hurt, even though I didn't intend to do that. Absence of malice isn't a satisfactory apology. Number 5, the non-responsible apology. It goes something like this: "I'm sorry this whole thing happened. Let's just put it behind us and move ahead." It's not admitting I did anything. It's just sorry for the circumstances that caused this situation. That's not an apology. That's not an admission of guilt. That's not a recognition of what I did that was either a mistake or an error. It really sounds nice when you first hear it. "I'm just sorry this whole thing happened." Well, a wise mate might respond, "And how did this whole thing happen?" Let's work through that for just a moment. How this whole thing happened. Number 6 is the bitter apology. It goes something like this. You finally reach a point of exasperation and you say, "I'm sorry, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. It always is." There's nobody ever been satisfied with that apology. Nobody. It's probably overstated, for sure. I mean, if you really are married to someone who is always at fault, you really married badly. I mean, we all can share some fault in circumstances. But that apology just kind of says, "You know what, you're jumping on me and you're blaming me. Let me just admit it. I'm always at fault. I'm sorry. It's me, it always is." Doesn't work. Doesn't resolve the situation. No mate ever said, "Thank you for that. I appreciate you admitting you're always at fault." Number 7 is the evasive apology. An evasive apology. It goes something like this: "Let's just not be mad anymore. Let's just not be mad anymore." In other words, the conflict that led to this point, let's just pretend it didn't happen or it just dissipated and we're okay again. It doesn't resolve the issue. Somebody's hurt. You can't just say, "Hey, let's just not hurt anymore." Doesn't work. It's like coming in and from playing with your friends and saying, "Man, I got a really bad cut on my leg. I fell off the bike," and somebody say, "Just rub some dirt on it." It doesn't really help. You don't go, "Oh, dirt. Oh, yes, now it feels better." Let's just not be mad anymore doesn't work. There's a ceasefire apology, number 8. It goes like this: "I'm willing to apologize if you are." You can't both demand that the other one stick their hand out to shake hands first. Can't do that. I'm willing to apologize if you are. And if you're not, I'm not. I think it is true. Listen, I do not believe that most conflicts have one person solely at fault. We'll talk a little more about that as we move through this. I don't believe that. But the idea that I will only apologize if you will apologize isn't really admitting I did something wrong. In God's eyes, it doesn't matter if you ever apologize. I'm still called upon to apologize for what I did. If I'm the one in the wrong, I'm a one in the wrong before God, I need to apologize about that. Ask forgiveness. If no one else does, I'm still called upon to do that. This one really cuts. It's called the blame-shifting apology. It goes something like this. You know what? I am really sorry you're so sensitive. Again, it may very well be that the other person is sensitive. And it may be that you want to talk about that. You know, I do think you were a little sensitive. Love believes all things. I did not intend to say to you what you thought I said. I think you were being a little touchy or peevish or prickly about that. You can say those things, you can talk about those things, but not in the bubble of the apology you're offering. It can't be, I'm sorry you're so sensitive. I'm sorry you're so touchy. I'm sorry you lack self-esteem to such a degree that you take everything personally. That's a blame-shifting apology. The last one is a blame-sharing apology. It goes like this. You know what? I'm sorry. I guess we're both just cranky and tired. That's a sharing of the apology. You've apologized for your mate whether they intended to apologize or not. And that doesn't work. We all have conflict. It happens in all of our marriages. It happens early in our marriages. There's a story about a wedding taking place and a woman who's a relative of one of the members of the wedding party comes in the back door and she's asked the question by the usher, whose side are you on? And she said, oh dear, are they fighting already? It can happen. On the wedding day, there can be that kind of conflict. So how do we deal with it? What does a good apology sound like? A good apology has three elements. Three things that are critical to a good apology. Now again, we're not using these three elements in the situation I talked about where I'm on the airplane and I hit somebody getting my backpack out of the overhead compartment. I don't go into the three-stage mode of apology for that. But when it's clear conflict that's going to be a disruption to the relationship, then I need to think about these three things. I don't need to think about this if Paula says, you went to the store, I told you to get marshmallow cream with all the other things you got, you forgot the marshmallow cream. I don't need to give this 3-point apology. Well, sit down, Paula, let me go through all this with you. I think it's sufficient in that case for me to say, I'm sorry, I didn't see that on the list. It's my fault, it always is. No, I'm always. You know, we're both just cranky and here's what a good apology sounds like. Number one, it expresses regret. An apology should come from a realization you've hurt someone you care about. It should express regret. I'm sorry you were embarrassed. I'm sorry that you felt used. I'm sorry that my words hurt you. It's somebody you care about. And so it should express regret that you hurt somebody that you love and care about. Without regret, an apology is cold. If you don't express regret, I'm sorry that I hurt you. If it's just, I'm sorry, it's cold. It's cold. It doesn't connect like we want to connect in our marriage. Number two, the apology should have an acceptance of responsibility. First, regret. Sorry I hurt you. Number two, responsibility, accepting total responsibility for your actions or your inaction. Total responsibility for your action or inaction. Doesn't mean, listen, I did not say you're taking total responsibility for the conflict. But you are accepting total responsibility for what you did that you now regret. That's why you can't give the, I'm sorry, but you know how angry I get when you compare me to my mother. That's not accepting responsibility. That's saying there's some justification for that, for my anger. Don't compare me to my mom, or you get this every time. You can't do that. Accepting total responsibility. Without responsibility, an apology is no apology at all. It's really justification. If you don't accept responsibility, it's justification. I have a right. You may say the words you're sorry, but you've just given. When God says to Adam, what is this you've done? What is this you've done? Adam really says, if I may put it in terms, I'm sorry for what I did, but the woman you gave me. Man, he doesn't just throw her under the horse's hooves. He throws God under there. He says, the woman you gave me, really your fault, God. I mean, if you hadn't given her to me, I wouldn't have eaten that. That's not accepting any responsibility whatsoever. And Eve learns from that. I mean, that's a really interesting, if it weren't so tragic, it'd be funny that God says, what is this you did? And he says, it's her. And then he says to her, what'd you do? And she says, it's him, to the snake, the serpent. She says, it's his fault. And then when he turns to the serpent looks in there, ain't anybody else to blame. But it's not accepting responsibility. Nobody's accepting responsibility for what happened. Third, a remedy. A good apology should have a remedy. You can't undo the past, but you can offer a plan to prevent future hurt. So again, this is ridiculous to use in a very minor context. Paula says, you didn't bring home marshmallow cream. I'm sorry, I know that really put you out because you were going to use that today. And it's totally my fault. You wrote it down. I just didn't read it. I really apologize for that. But I'll tell you what, that's not going to happen again because next time I'm going to the store with that stuff tattooed on my hand. Now that contains all the elements. It's got regret that I caused her difficulty. It's got responsibility. It's my fault. And it's got a remedy. I'm going to be tattooed. I don't need that. I don't need to do that. Paula doesn't expect that in that situation. But in a real conflict, I need to offer a remedy. Because without a remedy, listen, without a remedy, an apology offers little future hope. When you apologize, you want to give a hope that this is behind us now. Now look, Paula will be the first one to tell you, I've apologized for some things over and over and over again. The same thing. And there are times when Paula has apologized for the same thing. Done the same thing she did before. But the recognition that we're working on it, we are working on it, we're trying. We may forget, we may stumble, we may fail, we may become weak again. Satan may be stronger than we are. All that can happen, but we are recognizing we don't want to do this again. Without remedy, without saying, here's what I'm going to do to make this right, then your partner doesn't have a great hope, a sigh of relief. Good, we can work on that. Now, I want to show you something. I just love this. My favorite story in all the Bible is the greatest short story in the history of the written language. It's found in Luke chapter 15. I've preached on this so many times. I've got some 23 sermons on the prodigal son, and there isn't one of them that's repeated from the other. This is the deepest thing. I mine it again and again and again. And one day I was reading this, and it hit me. This prodigal offers the perfect apology. It's the perfect apology. It has all three elements. Now look at it, verse 18. Well, first of all, verse 17 sets the scene. He came to his senses, and he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread, but I'm dying here with hunger? So he says, I will get up, and I will go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven, and in your sight I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. It's got all three elements. It just hit me. Oh, that's it. That's why it's such a beautiful statement. In the first place, he says, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. He accepts the responsibility. I did this. You didn't cause this. He could have said, what could he have said? Look, Dad, I've done some things wrong. You did some things wrong. Let's just drop this. I'm home. He could have said, this wouldn't have happened if you hadn't given me the inheritance. I know I asked for it, but you didn't have to give it to me. If I asked for a gun, would you give me that? It's your fault, Dad. Or it could have been a blame sharing. You know, it's a little bit of you, a little bit of me. It could have been any of those other things. Look, Dad, I'm sorry. Can we just drop it and give me back my bed? But he accepts the responsibility. I have sinned, and it's been against heaven and in your sight. It's saying there, I know I hurt you. He is expressing his regret. First by physically coming home, but then in these words, I've sinned against you. I hurt you. I know that. I am so sorry. And then he offers a remedy. He says, look, I don't even want to come back as the son. I don't deserve that. Just make me a hireling. That's a remedy. Now, thankfully, the father doesn't accept it. Father accepts him back as a son. But there are all the elements that we're looking for in a true, worthwhile apology. In most arguments, there is something each of us can take responsibility for. And I have found this to be true. When I'm largely at fault in a situation with my wife, if I offer her a genuine, full apology, I often get back from that something like, well, I accept your apology, but I'll tell you, I probably brought that up at the wrong time. I can certainly find a way to share in the responsibility of that. I didn't bring it up in the right way. I'm sorry I used that word. I know that's a trigger point for you. I shouldn't have said your mom in that situation. There are things that we can, the tone that I took, the timing, I brought it up in front of somebody else. I shouldn't have done that. Remember 1 Corinthians 13 verse 5, it says, love doesn't take into account a wrong suffered. You need to work through that and get past it. And love doesn't rejoice in unrighteousness, verse 6 says. If we're developing a good relationship, husband, wife, parent, child, sibling to sibling, we don't rejoice in the fact that somebody's done wrong. We don't hold it over their head. This is the problem with the elder brother in the parable of the prodigal. The father accepts that. The older brother rejoices in unrighteousness. When this son of yours, he doesn't even accept that it's his brother, this son of yours returns who has wasted your money with prostitutes. You kill the fatted calf and celebrate. That's a man who's rejoicing in unrighteousness. Okay, forgiveness. Forgiveness, like love, is something you do, not just something you feel. Something you do, not just something you feel. In Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 and 22. Matthew 18, 21 and 22. Peter came and said to him, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? And Jesus said, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Now again, the numbers aren't important. The point is, you forgive him as often as you need to forgive him. And Peter doesn't say, I don't feel like that. And Jesus doesn't say, forgive him as often as you feel like it. He says, you forgive. It's important to do that. Forgiveness has 3 elements. I'm not going to give you bad acceptances of an apology or bad ways to forgive. I'm going to get straight to the 3 elements of true forgiveness. Number 1, now again, we're talking about big issues. We're talking about real difficult circumstances. When the prodigal comes home, I have no doubt that the father gave him these things. Though it's not stated in the story, it is shown in the God that the father represents. Number 1, empathy. To feel what the person apologizing for feels. Knowing we've been there too. Forgiveness is the act of admitting we are like other people. You hear that? Forgiveness is the act of admitting we're like other people. I forgive you because I want to be forgiven. Isn't that what Jesus said in that prayer? God, forgive me as I forgive other people. I need to show that kind of empathy toward the person who's asking. Not say, fine, I appreciate you doing that, you needed to. But rather expressing, you know what, I accept your apology, I've been there. You know that. Nobody knows that better than you do. I understand how hard it was for you to apologize. I know that you were hurt, but I accept your apology for doing what you did. It's understanding the person who is apologizing. Number 2, compassion. A longing to relieve their suffering, especially of one we love so much. This apology acceptance is love in action. You know, now listen, I want to say something. I mean, we may be talking about really major things. We might be talking about, even as we talked over this weekend, we might be talking about a spouse who's asking forgiveness, sincerely asking forgiveness for infidelity or for drug use or for abuse or for, sincerely asking. Not the apologies we looked at, but really trying to correct a circumstance or a situation. It might be a spouse who's put you in severe financial distress. It might be a careless act that wrecked the car you love. So being compassionate and understanding, this is ripping the heart out of the person who is apologizing. They may be weeping because they have hurt you and they're begging your forgiveness. Expressing compassion helps assuage that. When we come to God, He doesn't stand back there with His arms crossed saying, it's about time you got here. The Father ran to the Son and embraced Him and kissed Him repeatedly. UN Ambassador Jeane Kirkpatrick once said, we have our wars when at least one of the parties in a conflict wants something more than it wants peace. Man, that's brilliant. You have war when one of the two parties wants something more than it wants peace. That same thing's true in marital conflicts, parental-child conflicts, sibling conflicts, best friend conflicts, neighbor conflicts, brethren conflicts. If you want anything more than you want peace, you'll keep the conflict going. But if you can express your compassion for the person who's apologizing so that it will bring about that peace, wonderful things will happen. Empathy, compassion, grace. Grace. To accept that gently, with generosity. It's an undeserved gift. It is beauty and charm and elegance. Accepting it with grace. Not patting your foot, crossing your arms, saying, I'll take it. But with beauty, charm, and elegance, accepting one's forgiveness. So what would that sound like? What would it sound like to truly accept somebody's sincere, heart-wrenching apology? I'm not giving you words to memorize, but I've put those elements together in what I think would be an appropriate acceptance of an apology. Again, absolutely inappropriate for Paula to offer this to me when I failed to bring home marshmallow cream. But if I've done something that has wounded her heart deeply, and I know I've done that, perhaps I have even put our marital bliss in jeopardy by something I've done. When I bring that apology to her feet and lay that out with my regret and my responsibility and my remedy, a beautifully accepted apology might sound something like this. Thank you for apologizing. I know I'm not perfect either. And I've done things in the past to hurt you as much as you've done to me. I forgive you. I'm really glad we talked this through. And let's not let this be a barrier between us. We have been getting along so well lately. You're a wonderful husband or wife, and I love you very much. I'm going to tell you, folks, that kind of acceptance of an apology can bring a couple back together again. Not after a long, I'm going to have to get over this and you just stay in your corner of the room and I'll stay in mine and we'll only come back out when I'm ready. But that kind of statement to one whose heart is broken over their sin against you can bring about incredible healing powers. Incredible reconciliation. And I will tell you, and I'm not saying this lightly, this is not meant to be trite at all. The making up after that kind of conflict may be some of the most intense, loving moments of your life. It may demonstrate the kind of love and acceptance God gives us in our lives together. It will show the amazing grace that we reflect that is owned and operated by our Father in heaven. I'm not talking about something as simple as kissing and making up. I'm talking about a deeper reconnection of heart to heart that comes about because of the intensity of the conflict that was there in the beginning. How to apologize. How to forgive. This is critical. This is biblical. This reflects the heart of our God. Join me in a final prayer, would you please? Lord, it is a beautiful day outside, and it is even more beautiful to be here, assembled together as living stones to provide for you a fit habitation to come among us. Your word is evident here. Your children are manifest here. We pray, Father, that the things we've talked about this morning aren't just good, wise, earthly counsel, but that these things reflect your heart and where you want us to be. May we have your amen, please, to the things we've said. We have tried this morning to accurately understand how we can resolve conflict in such a way that it brings you glory and brings about the results of strengthening, tightening, improving our marital relationships, our parent-child relationships, our familial relationships with each other, and those we have even with the people of this world. May we be imbued with your grace, and may we be so aware of what our sins do to disrupt relationships, not only with each other, but in a deeper way, in a more serious way, disrupt our relationship with you. So clear the channels in our lives, that we might love our husbands and our wives as we ought, and that we might love you, our God, with all our heart, all our soul, all our mind, and all our strength. We ask you to hear us in the name of the one who has forgiven us and provided a constant way of forgiveness, Jesus, our Lord. And all God's people said, Amen. We'll stand adjourned for a few moments. I gave you a little extra time.